Welcome to Diced Onion, a Warrior podcast. We're your hosts, Angelo and Mike Haggerty. Welcome. This is episode 2, season 2 of the excellent show Warrior. Mike, we're rolling in now into talking about an excellent episode.
Yeah, and I have a ton of notes about this one. I've been looking forward to this one. We really see some good character development this week. But I meant to ask you, by the way, because we're going to holiday season. Before we get into that, how was your Halloween, and are you ready for Thanksgiving?
I'm ready for Halloween, or I was ready for Halloween. That came and went. Thanksgiving is always my favorite holiday because you get together with family and you just eat a bunch of food and you watch a bunch of football. And it's all about just being together with people more so than like other holidays that have kind of like obligations attached to them in a sense. That's why I like Thanksgiving. How about you? Ready to roll?
Yeah, the wife's already got the bird stuffed in the freezer. How big it is. I was supposed to say it's like 12, 15 pounds, something like that. But yeah, we got the taters, the stuffing's, all the fixings. I think I actually like the fixings sometimes a little bit more than the actual turkey.
Yeah, the side stuff's always better. I mean, the mashed potatoes and the corn and whatever else. Like, every house has like a different like Thanksgiving specialty item, right? That like
Right.
Aunt Sadie's making her special, I don't know, crab dip with apple in it.
I actually had an Aunt Sadie once upon a time. Funny to say that, but I really did. Yeah.
Pull that name out of my hat.
Yeah.
But yeah, so in case we forget before the show ends, happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody else who's watching the show too.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Yeah, gobble gobble.
It's funny because you got the whole orange background over there, very with fall thematic, and I'm wearing orange as well. So we're kind of ready to roll. So let's talk about this episode, season 2, episode 2. It's called The Chinese Connection. That's the first homage, of course, to Bruce Lee, one of his great movies, The Chinese Connection, one of my favorites. And so obviously the title of this episode borrowed directly from that original air date, October 9th, 2020. And the opening scene sees Bill doing some what looks to be police work, chasing a guy around, trying to apprehend somebody. But I kind of suspected that wasn't the case, and we get confirmation shortly thereafter, don't we, Mike?
No, this was not police work. This was Fung Hai work. And we see him at his other job, and he's chasing down a debtor. And
you said debtor? I wrote deadbeat.
No, that's good too.
Yeah,
a guy who's screwed. Let's put it that way.
He's screwed because Bill's collecting for the Fung Hai, right?
Yeah, and of course, we now see that Bill is using the Fung Hai. He's portraying himself as the good cop compared to the Fung Hai, so to speak. It's a good cop, bad cop scenario, and I did mean that pun, by the way, because the guy says, "I think you broke my ribs," because he's trying to climb up a wall, and Bill tackles him off the wall. And the guy says, "I think you broke my ribs." He goes, "That's nothing compared to what the Fung Hai would do to you."
Exactly. So the guy does pay up, and as Bill's counting the money, he turns and gives the guy another punch, and he goes, "That's for making me run." And that is where the scene ends. It's a pretty quick one compared to most of the opening scenes. This one gets done very quickly. And what we see is that Bill is blurring the line between his job as a cop and his moonlighting gig working for Zing and the Fung Hai. But that is where we cut into the credits. When we come out of the credits, we got Young Jun and Assam taking a walk, and they are discussing their opium deal that they've got in the works.
Yep. And they're going to the Barbary Coast. They're going to meet with Rosalita and someone else, and they're going to negotiate. Because we saw from last week, if you remember, that they were trying to kind of find a new opium source because the Chinese were expensive, and obviously now it does appear that Longzi is undercutting them on business by using alternate.
Yeah, and another thing to connect to last week's episode was that Assam, speaking to Rosalita Vega over there at the Barbary Coast, he had said to her near the end of the episode, "If I had asked, you told me that if I needed help, I can ask you," or something like that. So now we're getting a sense of what her help is because she's involved here. Now, before we get into what happens next, Young Jun is asking Assam, what's your motivation here, man? Like, why are you so hyped up about this? You're like almost way more into this than you should be. And Assam says he wants to avenge for his loss because he's the one who lost their ruling in Chinatown by getting defeated by Li Yang, and he wants to start to make up for it and take down Mai Ling. And of course, Young Jun says, I can get behind that. That's when they meet up with Rosalita, and she says to them, you guys are late. Happy Jack doesn't like to wait around. And we don't know who Happy Jack is, but we're going to find out soon, aren't we?
Yeah, and I just want to actually double back to what you said about Assam and how when Young Jun was asking about his motivation,
Yeah.
because I found this kind of interesting. I found this a little bit of a character development in the sense that up until now, we haven't really seen Assam be really into the whole Tong lifestyle. But here he is, he's going full force and he wants to avenge his loss, but he's avenging his loss by helping them produce opium. So he's kind of not really doing the right thing here. He's kind of he's, you know what I'm saying? He's like, he's kind of turned the page a little bit. I mean, he wants to help the Chinese, but at the same time, he's going all in on the drug business now.
I think it's just a matter of Assam looking for something to continue to fight for. And since the Tong is who has taken him in, he's going to find ways to be passionate about fighting for them. And if Mai Ling is the target as a result of fighting for them right now, he's all in on that. That's for sure.
Okay, good point. Good point. I just thought it was interesting that he's kind of lost a little bit of that moral high ground here a little bit.
Yeah, and part of me wonders if it's a cover because who gets discarded by a group and then rejoins them and everything's honky dory, right? There's got to be some scars, some hidden or not.
That's what I'm wondering too.
Not so deep seated resentment towards these guys. So I'm not ready to completely label Assam's motivations as all about just the Tong. That's kind of where I'm at. He's got something else going on. That's my feeling. But anyway, Rosalita, Young Jun, and Assam walk up to this, I don't know, whatever facility building, and there's a couple bodyguards out there. They're guarding the door anyway, and they clearly know Rosalita. And she kind of tells them they're with me, and they stand down, and in we go.
And that's where we meet Happy Jack.
Yeah, he didn't look that happy though.
No, and Young Jun pointed that out.
Yeah, he does say that.
Young Jun was like, he doesn't look happy.
His first words are like, pretty much, I don't want to mess with the Tongs. That's, a headache that I just do not need. So, Happy Jack knows who the Tongs are. This is not some kind of first understanding of one another.
No. We see right away that Happy Jack is not a rube. He's been around the block and he knows the deal. He's obviously a player in the underworld in this universe.
Right.
And the sticking point is not so much the supply, it's the storage. Well, it's also, besides dealing with the Tongs, it's also storage has become an issue.
Well, let's kind of backtrack before you get that far. Clearly, Happy Jack is the guy they're being introduced to buy this local supply of opium. And first of all, he is taken aback by Assam's ability to speak English, right? That's the first thing.
Yeah, he says, you speak the kings, and Assam says, it's not my king.
Right, exactly. He is not my king. But then from that point, negotiations begin. And Assam is not mincing any words. We need a dozen crates to start, and we need storage. We offer you 210. And Happy Jack is like, that's not enough to store it for you. 300.
He says if we do 300, we might as well stick with the Chinese. And then Happy Jack says, maybe you should.
Yeah, whatever. Not my problem, right? So finally, they settle on a number, and Happy Jack asks for the cash. He wants to see it. They flash it, and he says half up front, and then you can return tonight with the rest when you pick up your stuff. In or out right now. I don't have time to jerk around.
Yeah, and then Assam turns to Young Jun, who obviously we know that Young Jun doesn't speak English.
Yeah.
And he says to him, he goes, kind of what you said a few moments ago. He goes, look, he recognizes the suits. He's not going to screw with us.
Right. He knows who they are. And so they agree. They give him his cut of the money. And who said it? Was it Young Jun? Now he looks happy.
Yeah.
When he had all the money.
Yeah. And Assam says, I guess we found out what makes him happy.
Exactly. So here we go now. We move on to the next scene, and we find Bill and Lee are together, and Lee is starting to lay out some of these connections to all the Swordsman murders. And as he's laying out the various victims along the way, he finally hones in on the two businessmen, Simmons and McCormick, if you recall, the ones that were tied in with Atoy and her partner. And he and Bill both kind of agree that out of all the victims in this, those two guys don't quite fit.
No, they don't. And Atoy, maybe I'm starting to wonder if she may have overplayed her hand here a little bit because, but then again, considering the level of police work we see outside of Lee, maybe maybe she wasn't worried about it.
Well, again, exactly, Mike, because Lee was pretty much, we've seen, the only guy doing any real detective work. And once again, as he's laying out all these connections, he's still the only guy doing detective work, although at least this time Bill looks like he's sort of paying attention. And so very quickly, Lee gets to the point that he started looking into some of the more recent business deals of McCormick and Simmons, and he finds the connection to Atoy's partner, Patterson, to the murdered men, and he just feels like something's fishy about that deal.
Yeah, because he paid above market value, well above market value on that.
Yeah.
And his thinking at this point is that maybe he, or I think it was Bill that said, so you think he realized he got screwed, and then he decided to take out his trusty knife and his trusty sword and kill them, kind of mockingly he says that.
Right, of course.
Because they can't, almost like he can't conceive of a non-Asian using a sword to kill someone. Well, in the context of this show and this time, he's right, but it's kind of a little bit like, come on, you think this guy did it?
Right. And of course, Bill says, so you want to go talk to this Patterson now?
And then, of course, we get another little homespun saying from Lee where he says, you never get the lard unless you boil the hog.
Can't get the lard unless you boil the hog, he said. Such a great line. And that is where the scene ends. So obviously, Bill and Lee are going to be on their way to talk to Patterson, who is, of course, as we recall, Atoy's beard, who fronts all of her deals, and they're kind of splitting the profits in the background. All right, we move on now, and it's the mayor and Buckley, and they're with some of the businessmen, and the topic at hand is the explosion that ended the previous episode, Leary's explosion. And we weren't sure exactly what blew up in that scene when we closed last week's show, Mike, but now we know it was one of the factories, right?
Yeah, it was Leary sending a statement about a factory and it makes sense. They're hiring Chinese workers, and that's what Leary's whole point of contention is right now. That's his point. That's his motivation. Right. And he's rattled some of the business owners, which is what he wants. Right. I mean, what is well, let's call this terrorism. Terrorism is achieving your means through fear and intimidation. And that's what he's trying to do. And it seems to be working because the businessmen do seem rattled.
Absolutely. And the thing is that one of the complaints was, I'm not insured against dynamite. I'm insured against regular stuff. There's no insurance against being sabotaged, right? And as this conversation's going on, in walks Mrs. Mayor, Penny. And at first it was, what are you doing here? But then she says, is this not an emergency meeting of all the local business owners? And she begins to, of course, now challenge her husband in front of all the other business owners.
Right. And I was thinking about this, when you boil down this show, it really comes down to relationships between individuals, right? We see the conflict between Penny and her husband,
right?
The relationship between Assam and his sister, that conflict, and Assam and young June, and so on and so on. And well, and of course, Penny's, she's in a love, or was in a love triangle with Assam.
Right.
But now we see the point of contention, and Penny owning this business is become a real sore point for the mayor, given the sensibilities of the 19th century and what women's place was supposed to be then, or how society viewed women. And she's kind of trying to rise above the fray of that. She's trying to get above that. And this has become a real sore point between her and her husband, but not just between her and her husband, but you can see, we've already seen that there's been offers for her business from other people, probably started by her husband, or at least her husband got the ball rolling on that. So we're seeing a lot here about this relationship, and we knew their relationship wasn't great. I mean, they're not Ozzy and Harriet, but in this meeting, we see the tension ratcheted up a little bit more.
Yeah, because now she's there not as his not as his wife, but as another business person whose livelihood is at risk. And at the point where the other guy says, I wasn't insured, I don't have that kind of insurance, the mayor says, we'll get you an interest-free loan to help you rebuild. And Penny says, a generous offer. Is that available to all of us? And, so she's right away trying to paint him into a corner while he offers lip service to all of the business owners that his office, the mayor's office, will protect them. But that remains to be seen as the scene ends there.
Well, actually, can I just backtrack here a little bit because
Sure.
there was one really quick moment in here where she mentions that she spoke with Chief Flanagan.
Oh, right.
Right. And Blake, he says, you spoke to Flanagan, and like he kind of snapped, and you saw the room kind of go quiet for like an awkward silence. Like this all of a sudden went from a business meeting to a domestic disagreement right here.
Yeah.
And she, speaking of being rattled, here's the mayor rattled by his wife, who's now she's speaking to the chief of police about this. What are you doing?
Yeah. The funny part of that is when he says to her, you spoke to Flanagan. I mean, that's hardly appropriate.
Right. He's really rattled by that.
Yeah, totally. And that is where the scene ends. And the mayor, he already doesn't like his wife's dalliance in business. And this is certainly not helping her cause when it's time for dinner talk or pillow talk. We move on now and we see Chow, and he's in a place that's not Chinatown. And there's a woman that he's speaking to. And going back to last episode, Toy had mentioned something about Chow's secret. Is this woman his secret? That was my first thought, because he does give her an envelope with obviously money because he tells her it's a little bit light. And then they begin to have kind of a testy conversation here.
Yeah, and it appears that if she's not his ex-wife, officially she's a woman that he had a relationship with, and he's paying her some sort of alimony. That was what I took
for something, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
He comments about her dress. She was making the dress or pressing the dress or whatever it was she was doing, and she makes a comment to him saying, I haven't been entertaining, if that's what you're thinking. So obviously this woman was previously, maybe currently, a prostitute as well that Chow had come to know and is involved with somehow or other. And during this testy conversation, he pulls out a little toy like a spinning top and just says to the woman, here, give her this.
Give who this?
Yeah. Well, we find out right away, don't we?
Yeah, and we find out that maybe the woman Claire was not necessarily the secret or all of the secret. And the other part of the secret is this young girl,
Hannah. Yeah. She calls for Hannah. Hannah, look who's here. And out comes this little girl. And Chow doesn't want her to call the girl. He's like, no. And no chance. Out comes the little girl. And now you get the connection. What's the secret, right?
Yeah, that he apparently had a child with this woman, because the woman says, the little girl says, thank you. And she goes, thank you what? Thank you, Papa. But then Chow corrects her. No, Papa. Friend. Just friend.
Okay.
And he's very kind with her. He's very, very nice to her, very loving to this little girl. And then he says, okay, you go now.
I don't know about loving if he tells her not to Papa, but he is at least trying to, I don't know what it is. Is it to wash away some guilt he may be feeling about not being involved directly with this child? Why isn't he more involved? Is it because of the fact that, a Chinese guy cannot have a child with a white woman in San Francisco in 1878? There's a lot of questions here, but we do find out that Chow's secret is that he does have, I don't know, a love child, I guess. If this were Game of Thrones, would have been a bastard, right?
If it was Game of Thrones, and Claire might have been his sister.
So accurate, also accurate. But now we know that secret, and the scene cuts away, and here he is, Toy's partner, Patterson, sitting with Bill and with Lee, and they don't waste any time. Lee gets right to the point. Why'd you pay double for the property?
And Patterson, he said that there were multiple bids, and he knew the long-term value of this was very valuable, and he just wanted to get it before anyone outbid him, and he didn't care what he had to pay.
Right. And he knew that it would be multiple bids, multiple offers, and he figured overpaying would do the trick to get the job. And Lee has done his homework because he says there's nothing around here that even compares to the value of what you just paid. So he's looking at comps like a realtor might, right? And so he again wants to know why you overpaid, and that's when Patterson talks about the long-term pictures of the property. And then Bill throws in a question and says, ever do business with the Chinese?
Yeah, Bill kind of got right to the point there.
Yeah.
And he says something to the effect of, why would I ever do business with them, or something like that. He goes, I would never do that.
Right.
And, but Bill's letting him know subtly that they're kind of onto him. Well, I mean, just being there.
It was one of those, like, almost like detective moves where you throw something out there to see what kind of reaction you're going to get, like a natural reaction you're going to get. And at that point, Patterson excuses them and says that he's got another appointment coming up, and the two policemen leave, and you see Patterson sitting there at his desk, and I'll say it bluntly, he's shitting his pants a little bit right now.
Yeah, I actually love that part, because when they walked out, you see he almost kind of sinks. He's like, he's like,
yep.
He deflates, like, he realizes he's maybe not caught, but he realizes that someone's aware.
Yeah, and clearly Lee smells something, and as soon as they walk out of his office, Bill says to Officer Lee, I've played enough poker to spot a bluff when I see one.
Right. And then Bill says something, and Bill kind of, and this is also what I liked about this scene. I thought it was actually kind of weirdly nice in a way, because Lee notices that Bill looks a little happy after that, and he kind of asks him about it. He goes,
right.
Every so often it's good to do a little police work. So we see that Bill is actually sort of I don't know if it's the influence of Lee kind of making him feel like enjoying police work again, but we saw Bill the cop for the first time instead of Bill the leg breaker.
See, I took it as Bill feeling good that he was doing police work instead of just chasing around deadbeats for zing, or at least doing something to kind of balance out the fact that he was doing the wrong thing, trying to do more of the right thing. The other great line Bill has right here, aside from the I played enough poker to spot a bluff when I see one, is he says, I've also met enough murderers to know that he doesn't have the stones to do it.
Yeah.
So now Bill establishes, right, two things. We don't believe, right? Yeah. Number one, we think something's going on here. Number two, I don't think he's a murderer. And that's when we get the title of the episode thrown in there, when Lee says to Bill, we just got to find the Chinese connection.
Yep. And they worked it in. Yep.
And they worked it right in. And I was like, wow, that is pretty great. All right. Scene. Assam's visiting Penny at the factory. I was wondering what that was all about. Like, why would he just show up at her factory? But clearly he's been summoned, because Jacob lets him in, and she immediately kind of gets to the point, right?
Yeah, she wants to hire him and his tongue for security for the business.
Right.
And he doesn't want any part of it. He wants to be done with her, and he certainly doesn't want to be involved in this situation. Because he even says to her, he says, why don't you just hire the Irish and just be done with it? And this is where Penny she shows some real intensity, some real tenacity, I want to say. Right. She goes, and let Leary win. She's not going to let Leary win.
Right.
This is principle for her.
Yeah.
And they're kind of going back and forth. And she goes, this is to protect your people. And then Assam says, don't.
Right.
Don't even do that. He goes, first of all, even if this wasn't a bad idea, which it is, and we now see that Assam doesn't even know that her father's dead yet, because he says, your father will never go for it. And she goes, my father's dead. Yeah,
that's interesting that he didn't know that. I guess, why would he? Truthfully, he doesn't, fly around in those circles, but, he does offer his condolences. But then she says, I'll pay a fair wage. And he just says, it's good to see you. So that's it. That is it.
And here's what I took. I was wondering if this scene had a double meaning. That's it for the business deal, but also that's it for their relationship.
Well, the thing is, it was already it for their relationship, right? She told him, don't contact me. Don't come back. We're over. Remember, that had already happened.
Right.
Yeah.
I know, but I'm kind of just trying to read the tea leaves here, and I could be off, but I just kind of felt like maybe there was maybe just a little kindle, and he just kind of put the final nail in that coffin. Like maybe she had some second thoughts about their relationship. I know I'm really jumping down the rabbit hole on this one here, but I kind of took it as possibly might have been a little bit of a double entendre. Like that's it. Like you'll never see me again, kind of thing.
And as well, it should have been, like Assam said, this is a terrible idea. You called me a criminal. Like, there's all these reasons why they shouldn't even be speaking. And yet she wants to now hire him, bring in a Chinese gang to protect her Chinese workers from the Irish thugs and to protect her factory from being the next one firebombed.
Yeah.
And scene. So now we see, looks like the cops are raiding a brothel. There's a woman with them. As soon as the cops bust in, first thing they say is John's out. And it's kind of a little bit of a confusing scene at first.
Yeah, because they have a woman with them and a woman who looks like she has some money.
Yeah, she's well dressed.
And she's clearly not fond of the cops because she says something to the effect of, I think she asked him why they're not rounding up the Johns, and he says, she goes, "You don't tell me how to be a cop, and I won't tell you how to be a rich widow."
I tell you what, I won't tell you how to be a bossy rich widow, and you don't tell me how to be a cop. He says to her, but and then that's when we realize what her motivation is. She's rescuing these prostitutes from the shabby conditions, right? And the cop is not arresting the men. They're just busting up the joint, and she is clearly there for altruistic reasons. And that's the scene. That's a quick scene. I guess there's going to be greater development with her shortly.
Yeah, Miss Davenport. We know she's a widow.
Right. Miss Davenport, they called her. And I will say that I did a little research and found out that her character is modeled off of an actual person, Donaldina Cameron. Her timeline's a little bit later than Nellie Davenport's timeline, but she indeed was someone of some stature who was a pioneer in the fight against slavery in Chinatown in San Francisco, and she helped more than 2,000 Chinese immigrant girls and women escape from forced prostitution or indentured servitude. So there you have it, a real person modeling this character off of.
Thank you for doing your homework.
Yeah. Well, I got to give credit to Vonda over here. She brought it up first, and then I looked at it, and there you have it. And if anyone's interested, they can go on Wikipedia and get more info about her. We're now back with it's still Assam here, but now it's him with young June, and they're off to see Happy Jack to pay the other 50% of their money. And as they leave, Father June's out there, and he catches them.
And again, we see the ongoing struggle between Father June and young June, and to an extent, Assam, about showing restraint in the face of what's going on. Because as we've seen time and time again, Father June, he's not bending the knee to Long Z, but at the same token, he's exercising a bit more patience, and that's kind of what this whole scene is about. Again, because he goes, the biggest trees or that sway, they don't break with the wind.
Right, and the stiffest tree cracks.
Right, and then
young June says, going to find that out.
Right, but then young June counters with, "There's a difference between bending with the wind and bending over." And that's the way young June sees it.
Right, and Father June just says, "I need you to trust me. We uphold this treaty till I say otherwise." So clearly, he's got other plans. Till I say otherwise means it's not just going to be status quo. But listen, the young, impetuous young June wants to act now. I thought the scene was funny to begin with, though, because when Father June first started talking to them as they were taking their walk to go meet Happy Jack, he was talking about young June as a baby and how his mother dropped him off and said, "He's your problem now." And so we get a little more insight into young June. And exactly, I almost felt like Father June and Chow were very similar in their child situation. Like I almost felt like young June might have been Father June's secret somewhere else until he got dropped off when I heard that story.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't see that, but I can now see your point. Yeah, is it possible that young June's mother was a prostitute?
Yeah, I mean, that's the sense that I got. That's totally the sense that I got. And now here we are though with Assam, Young June, and they're with Happy Jack, and he drops a bomb on them. The deal changes now.
Well, before they don't even see Happy Jack before they find that out. They see his minions, and they say to him that they're not going to store it, and because the storage we've seen has been a point of contention through this, and then a fight ensues.
Yeah, they instantly scrap. Like, I don't even know how that even started. Like, it flashed so quickly. Next thing you knew, they're all just beating each other up.
Yeah, and young June, of course, has his handy knives out, and he's stabbing people. And
Yep.
well, then Happy Jack, he ends up breaking it up, and he points a gun at young June's head, and he goes, "It would be a shame to waste that beautiful hairdo on a corpse."
And that's when he says, "Now everyone calm the fuck down."
Yeah, which I was surprised he actually showed that much restraint, because I would think that from what I know about Happy Jack so far, that he would have just blown him away for killing his guys, because presumably they killed his guys or at least grievously injured them. But
yeah.
And again, he tells them that he's not going to store their molasses or their molasses.
Well, he's a businessman first, and he does say to them, "I have your shit. Your order is ready." Right. But you're going to have to find somewhere else because the cops have been raiding places, and I don't want to get caught holding the bag. And frankly, I don't blame them.
No,
I don't want to sell you narcotics and then hold on to them for you to come pinch little bits at a time as you need it.
Right.
Not a layaway plan over here.
This isn't a U-Haul. This isn't a storage unit.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So where do you want us to deliver the shit? He says to them. And now these guys have a problem. Where are they going to be storing their molasses? We're now back to Buckley and Mai Ling. They haven't met in a little while, and they're discussing the truce between the Tongs, which is clearly throwing off some plans that Buckley has in place.
Yeah, you notice every time they meet, they're always either in a carriage or they're by a carriage. In this case, they're by a carriage.
Yeah, they're actually outside. It's the first time you physically see them in public within speaking distance of each other. They've always been inside the carriages, right? And here they are outside discussing business. And he needs chaos, he says to Mai Ling, not this peaceful truce that's going on in Chinatown.
Yeah, after she hands him an envelope, and it's a big envelope, and
yeah.
I'm guessing that she thinks that this is going to just buy his happiness, but he's not interested in money. He's looking again at the long view, and he wants chaos. He wants violence, like you said.
Right.
And he's
go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I know where you're going.
Yeah, he says to her, he goes, "You're assuming that I have the luxury of time, and worse, you think you do."
Right. That's a great line. And then he closes it again with letting her know, "I hope you don't think that our interactions make us partners. I sell, you buy for today." So letting her know who's running the show here. Don't get too big in your britches. And that's really where the scene ends. He makes his message clear to her.
Yeah, he's letting her know, just probably in a better way than Mayor Blake is with his wife, kind of letting her know what her place is, at least in this moment. And it's kind of see a similar dynamic. There's Mayor Blake and his wife and her struggles to overcome her lot in life, and Mai Ling to be taken seriously, or at least more seriously, by Buckley.
Right.
I saw a parallel there.
Yeah, a little bit. And in either case, and then also don't forget, Buckley has had some conversations with Mrs. Blake as well, leading up to all this. So my feeling is that Blake holds women at a very low regard, kind of in the same level as he feels about the Chinese, just based on how he interacts with everybody and speaks about everybody. He really thinks who he is, truthfully, in the totem pole of society, and as well as just on a human level. He does definitely think he's better than everybody. Yeah. We now see Mr. Lee. He is asleep, but he wakes up, and you see him take a swig from a bottle. Looks like to be medicine. Hard to see what the label said at that point. And from there, we now see him kind of stumbling around the streets in the night, Mike.
Yeah, and he wanders into a bar, presumably because he thinks he'll find his medicine, which we find out when he meets a bartender, which, first of all, she's a black woman, which is important because you see he jumps back, and it reminds him, obviously, of his lost love.
Right.
She reminds him of his lost love, and he orders a whiskey with something extra. And she asks for clarity on that. He says, "We find out the name of the medicine, laudanum," which I actually didn't look if that's a real thing.
It,
Laudanum.
it is laudanum, and it is an opiate derivative.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So he asks for that, and she goes, "There's going to be an extra fee for that."
Got money? She
Yeah.
says.
Yeah.
And he's got it. He
And
got it.
she's pouring something into his whiskey, and then she kind of changes. She shifts a little bit. She goes, "We got a place out back if you want to sleep."
Well,
You
hang
shouldn't
on,
wander.
hang on. Before you get there, she pours that and he downs it. He downs it, right?
Right.
And
Right.
remember when she started pouring it, he says, "Hey, a little more than that." Right? He didn't like her light hand. He needed a little heavier pour. So then he downed it. She asked him what his name was, and that's when she got nice and started trying to offer him a place to chill while it kind of wears off.
Right. And then she actually changed it. She goes, "Or if you don't want to sleep, we can go out back," sort of propositioning him.
Right, right. And they
And
immediately get to kissing, don't they?
yeah, they're in the alleyway and they're kissing. And as the camera pulls back from Lee's perspective, he sees his dead girlfriend.
Right. He gets like a
And
flashback to her.
he gets a flashback. And then next thing you know, he starts to kind of buckle. He's not doing so well. And he goes, "What did you do to me?" And it looks like she slipped him a Mickey.
Yeah, I guess more than just the laudanum.
Yeah. And so then he kind of blacks out. And I think we see someone else also come out of the shadows to do whatever they're going to do to him.
Right. It happens pretty quickly, but definitely she set him up there.
Yeah. And that,
She definitely set him up there. But that's where the scene ends. We'll have to wait to see what happens exactly to Mr. Lee. But we're back to Officer O'Hara. We got Bill over here, and he is in bed with his wife. And are they making baby number 6? Could very well be. I mean, based on his track record of having a house full of kids. As a matter of fact, she makes the joke and says, "The last time you, I guess, what kind of boinked me like that, you gave me twins."
yeah, apparently Bill's pullout game is pretty weak.
They don't believe in that. It's against Catholic religion.
I guess so. Yeah. Yes, it is.
So maybe he gave her a baby, maybe not, but he does give her something, and he rolls back over with a nice piece of jewelry.
Yeah, necklace.
Yeah, necklace.
And as usual,
What's this?
yeah, as usual, his wife is suspicious about it, and she immediately suspects that he's at the tables. But he says, no, he's just been doing extra shifts dealing with the Chinese in Chinatown, and he plays it off like that.
Yeah, but she says to him, "What is this, poker winnings?" And he says to her, "When do you know me to win?" Right? So her comment was, "Well, you've been strangely flush lately."
Yeah.
And he explains it away that it's been overtime and, extra work and more shifts.
Yeah. And we're not sure if she buys it or not, but we do see the love between them. She says all she wants is for him to come home after a shift every night.
Yeah, I don't need jewelry. Just come back home every night. But I'm not, we've talked about Bill's wife a couple of times now, and I just don't think she buys his BS. She knows better. But what are you going to do? It's clear he's providing and he's over providing, and she can't complain about that, I guess. Lee awakens in an alley, maybe the alley he was making out with the girl in. I'm not really sure, but he wakes up almost getting peed on by some guy taking a leak in that same alleyway.
Yeah, and there's really not much to this scene. We just sort of see, well, now we see that Lee's alive, in case you were worried about that. And we see that he's not doing so well. As good a cop as he is, clearly he has a personal problem with opiates.
Yeah.
And this scene was just, I think, was just all about just showing, well, this is the levels that this will bring you to. And this is probably as good as it's going to get for him at this point.
And he got robbed as well. He doesn't have any money.
And he got robbed.
He got rolled while all that happened. And that was clearly the entire intention of what Abigail, the bartender, was leading towards when she brought him out back or invited him to stick around. She saw his wad of cash when he paid. And she said, "I can't give you change for that." And he said, "Keep it." And then that's when she got all nice and led him into the back to set him up to take his stash of cash. All right. The scene cuts back to Chinatown, and we see an opium deal. We see the handoff, right? just two hands, drugs for money. And then boom, hey, you. And a beating starts to happen. The guy
Yeah,
making the sale gets caught.
yeah, he gets caught by he gets caught by Long Z,
Right.
and he's selling on their turf. We've seen this play out in any number of movies in real life. You don't sell on someone else's territory.
I really like the edit here when the guy first got caught in the alleyway selling and he tried to run off and he goes in one direction and here comes a few long Z. Then he goes in the other direction and there's a few long Z. And then they grab him. And when they slam his head down or they slam his body down to the ground, the scene now is in Long Z headquarters. He's no longer in the alleyway. So they like slam
Yeah,
him down. And then when he looks up, he's there.
yeah, that was a good
So,
edit. Yeah,
yeah, they do. They slide you right into well, I guess almost an interrogation or at least post interrogation because Mai Ling tells Li Yang that looks like the Zoe
Sui
Singh
yeah.
Tong has been selling opium. And he says, how do you know that? And she says, he told me.
Yeah, so this is
After they
clearly
beat it out of him.
post-interrogation. Yeah, this is post-interrogation. Yeah, they beat it out of him.
Yeah.
And Lee Young, he apparently knows this Tong, and apparently they're a lesser Tong. Obviously, they're not at the level of Long Z or Hop Wei. And Lee Young is kind of stressing that he goes, well, this is nothing to get worked over. We can fix this. I'll just talk to him. And
Yeah, he says, listen, they're not a threat. They're small. Why would they even risk doing this? They have a young leader. Let me go talk to them. Let me go talk to them. But she wants to send a message. She's not really into talking, but she reluctantly agrees to allowing Li Yang to go talk to the leader of this Tong and set the situation straight. And as he's ready to leave,
but I want you to bring Zing with you.
I could see right when she says, I want you to bring Zing with you, Li Yang didn't like it.
No.
You could see it in his eyes. This actor, Joe Taslim, he conveys more with his face than he does with his words because the character of Li Yang is a very soft spoken, few chosen words guy, but his face says it all, especially in this episode in a couple of more scenes after this. But that is where the scene ends. So now he has to go be diplomat with the lunatic Zing at his side. And that is going to be an interesting outcome. We're back to Assam now, and he is at Penny's again. And she immediately says to him, reconsidering my offer?
And then they sort of negotiate back and forth. She offers him, what was it, $4? Then
well, hang on. Before that negotiation starts, he asks her one more time, why don't you just sell this place? And then she explains that it's my father's legacy. It also means I'm not dependent on the mayor's money. And it means a lot of things to her and why she doesn't want to sell. And then that's when he offers her protection and they start to negotiate, right? She wants 8 guards at $4 a week. He assures them her safety. And then that's when they start trying to come to an agreed upon number. What do they settle on anyway?
They ended up settling on $5.
Five, right. And that's when Assam says, I'll be back in an hour with the first shift.
Yeah.
So this deal happens very quickly. And now Assam cuts a deal with Penny. And I knew what this motivation was almost immediately when he turned around and showed back up at her door, Mike. He's looking to stash their opium in her factory. No question about it. And I kind of had a feeling that was going to happen during the scene when they were told that they would not be able to, Happy Jack would not be able to hold their stash for them. I kind of had a feeling that they were going to figure out that Penny's was going to be the spot. But boy, that's a sneaky move by Assam if that's exactly the case.
Yeah, and also too, I mean, who would suspect that Penny Mercer or Penny Blake would store opiates at her place of business? She wouldn't be suspected.
Well, obviously she's not going to know about it, right? We now leave their business agreement and we're off to a stage, a political stage where is that Crestwood who's speaking very loudly, railing against the Chinese, and a whole chant of send them back gets going on. And of course, Sitting on the stage there is the mayor, along with Mr. Buckley.
Yeah, and Senator Crestwood he's being very passionate, but interestingly enough, he's criticizing the police and the mayor pretty
Right.
much to their face. Actually, no, not pretty much. He is criticizing them to their face, which I thought was especially interesting. And he's not winning any. He's winning the crowd over for sure.
Right.
We see people rah rah cheering and all this because he's saying what they want to hear. But the police, we see Chief Flanagan is there with Bill, and they're kind of going back and forth, and Flanagan's not happy about getting called out on it, and
Of course.
Bill says something to him about politics, and then they start discussing the Chinese issue, and Flanagan wants results.
Find me a fucking swordsman.
Yeah, just find me a fucking swordsman. And then Lee shows up, and Flanagan says, "Oh, thank you for gracing us with your presence." He
Look
goes,
who decided to grace us with his fucking presence, he says.
he says, "Good morning, Chief."
I thought that little animosity that the chief showed towards Lee was rooted in Lee's rudeness to him in the last episode when he let him have it a little bit in front of Bill.
I think so too.
Yeah, I totally thought that. But as the scene winds down, Sophie's in the crowd there watching the senator speak, and Leary sees her and she sees him. They make eye contact, and she starts to walk. She heads over, right?
Yeah, she heads over to the Banshee and she walks in, and her and Leary are talking. And again, we see a little bit of that chemistry. And she says something about that her father had been there before, and he, assuming what her status in life is, he goes, "I doubt it."
Right.
And she goes, "No, I'm pretty sure he did, because he was looking to hire labor." And that's when Leary realizes who she is and who her father was.
Right. And he says it to her. He says, "Mercer was your father?" Right.
Right. And she goes, "You probably didn't like him very much." And he goes, "Well, to be fair, he didn't like me very much either."
That's right. That's right. What would your father think if you were here now? Right. He says to her.
And she goes, "Well, I something to the effect of, I didn't always do what he wanted, and that was part of the problem between us," or something to that effect.
Yeah. So that little free spirit attitude we saw out of her last week gets further defined as she fills in a little bit of her, little story about her rebellious spirit. Then she sits down at the piano and plays Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven. I would not have known what the piece was except for the fact that they said it.
Well, Leary said it, because Leary knew what it was.
Right. Well, he said Beethoven, and then she said the title. Right.
Right. But the fact that he even knew it was Beethoven shows a little bit of refinement.
I certainly would not have known that. That's for sure. But she plays for a little bit, and she's really good at it, even though she doesn't think so. She grabs a slug of his whiskey and bids him goodbye. "Thank you for letting me play the piano," she says to him.
That was Moonlight Sonata, by the way, in case anyone was wondering.
Right. Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven. And so she hands him the glass, and she goes, and he's holding the glass. He looks at it, and he has a similar scene like he did in front of his wife's tombstone last week. He looks at the glass, and he kind of mutters under his breath, doesn't he?
Yeah. He's not comfortable with whatever he's feeling right now.
"Fuck me," he goes.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Now we're back to the mayor. He's with Buckley, and he is embarrassed and angry at Crestwood's speech because he called basically all of them out, even the mayor, right in front of everybody. And he says, "This is an embarrassment." And Buckley quickly points out, "Your real embarrassment is that your wife has a factory and she's hiring Chinese people."
Yeah, and then he and the mayor go back and forth a little bit, and the mayor says, "Sometimes I wonder who you work for, Mr. Buckley." And Buckley very coyly responds, "The people of San Francisco, as do you, Mr. Mayor."
As do you, Mr. Mayor. And then he gives the carriage a tap, and the mayor is off. And again, you see how Buckley maneuvers, right? And he needles this mayor at every turn, and it's a constant reminder of the situation with his wife and the embarrassment that is causing.
Yeah, and we see the intermingling of the personal and the political relationship here between between Penny and Buckley and Blake.
We now are we're in a new place now. Looks like a fine dining or a finer dining establishment, some establishment that is not in Chinatown or any of the it's not the Banshee either. And it's my Ling walking through what looks to be a white man's place, right? There's no Chinese labor, there's no Chinese customers. And she finds somebody at the bar, and she sits down next to him and asks if who, are you Mr. Nichols? Mr. Nichols? And he says, how do you know that?
And yeah, apparently she's done her homework because she also knows that he is or was a Pinkerton.
Right.
And she wants to do business with him, but he's not going to do business with the Chinese. Kind of what Patterson said earlier. Patterson said, I never do business with the Chinese. But here, this guy, Mr. Nichols, he's actually saying it, and he means it. He goes, I'm not going to do business with Chinese.
Right. He goes, let me guess. You're coming to me because the Pinkertons won't do business with the Chinese either, right? And she, she does try to hire him. And she says, I want you to investigate Buckley. And he goes, the deputy mayor? And she hands him an envelope.
Yes, looks like another big envelope, too.
Hefty. And suddenly his tune changed, didn't it? It went from,
Yes.
I'm not working for the Chinese to, what do you need?
Money has a funny way of doing that.
Yeah. And My Ling's response was insurance.
Yeah.
So she's gearing up to protect herself against Buckley's movements in some way, because he made it clear that he sells, she buys. And remember, a mile outside of Chinatown, you're just another Chinese woman. So she's protecting herself in some way, and we will see what exactly it is that her detective can dig up for her. All right. Li Yang and Zing are talking to the leader of the Suzy Tong. And he is a pretty young dude, just like Li Yang says, and he's pretty much denying.
Lao Che,
thank you. Lao Che denies doing any dealing. He's like, hey, man, we're not doing that. And Li Yang doesn't necessarily buy it, but Li Yang is not there in anger either, right? He's like, look, just stop. This is the only warning. All you need to tell me is two things, two words. I understand. And just as he's like, and then he says, I understand. And it looks like we immediately come to a quick and painless agreement here, except
Zing's there.
except that Zing's on the meeting. So if Li Yang is there alone, we come to an agreement. But now Zing doesn't like that one bit. He still takes offense to the fact that these guys clearly were dealing on their turf, and he quickly changes the situation.
Yeah, he says you let these bottom feeders lie right to your face. Right. He says this bottom feeder just lied right to your face. And he says something to Lao Che, and then he says something, but he rips his throat out before he can even respond.
Immediately throat punches him and kills him on the spot, and boom, an instant brawl breaks out, as to be expected. And you see it on Li Yang again, like I was talking about Li Yang and the actor's ability to convey everything Li Yang is thinking with his face. Li Yang is pissed right now. He's pissed at Zing for doing it. He's pissed at My Ling for sending Zing along with him. And he now wonders what the hell's going on. He knows he got set up.
Yeah. And then after the brawl kind of dies down, he grabs Zing and he throws him against the wall. And this is one of my favorite lines of the episode. It's really inappropriate.
Yeah.
He calls him, Zing calls him Genghis cunt. Which to me, that would never be the title of the episode, but in another world, that would have been the title of the episode.
Right. But Li Yang definitely feels betrayed here, and it's
by My Ling, no less, which that's a really new twist on this one.
Exactly. And so now we'll see where that takes us. We're at our toys. We're in front of our toys, and the Davenport lady, Ms. Davenport from the earlier brothel liberation scene, she's there speaking with our toy, and clearly they know each other to some degree. Toy clearly aware of her work, and they start discussing and debating the happiness of the girls working at a toy's place.
Yeah, we see Mrs. Davenport can speak a little bit of Cantonese, and she realizes that Toy, they both complement each other on their linguistic skills in their second language.
Right.
So they're I wouldn't say they're friends, and they're borderline contentious, but a toy is not totally enamored of her presence at her business. And I also think that a toy is probably a little insulted. Like, a toy probably does take a certain amount of pride, I'm assuming, in how she treats her girls, and she probably believes that she treats her girls better than other brothels. So I think, I don't know, did you get the sense that she might have been a little offended, a little insulted?
Yeah, a little bit because, like Toy said, my girls are here by choice. I don't make anybody stay. They're happy here, and that's when Davenport says, "Well, are you sure about that? Maybe can I speak to them?" And Toy begrudgingly was about to let her in, right?
Yeah,
To
and
go
then
talk to
Chow
them.
walks out.
Yeah, and he throws in his little zing. I love what he says. He says,
Yeah.
Miss Davenport, here to save the world again."
She goes saving or, and then wait, how did she say it? She goes saving or exploiting.
No,
And
she says she says saving them from being exploited. And Chow says, "Well, someone has to."
right, and then she goes, which, right? Is that what she
Yes,
said?
he
And then
goes.
he goes, and then he says yes again, which I thought that was another great line from the episode too, by the way.
Yeah, and then that's when Toy does let her in to go talk to the girls. All right, now we're back to the. Remember earlier,
Exterior.
yeah, an episode ago where the original carriage of Chinese workers were heading to Penny's factory and they got accosted and beat up by the Irish thugs. Well, it looks like this is about to happen again as the carriage makes its way. The Irish thugs are there with their clubs and with their pipes and with their weapons, blocking the path of the Chinese workers. But things are different now, aren't they?
Yeah, the hop way is there, and I also have to wonder. I wonder if Father June knows about this too. Now that I think about it, would he have a problem with this?
That's a great question because they're taking men with them, right? It's not just young June and Assam pulling this off now. If he's going to be providing an 8-man shift every round the clock, you're talking about a minimum of 20 people being involved in this. And I don't see how you can hide from Father June that, hey, where are those 8 guys every night kind of thing. So I'm not sure if that's a loose end that the writers didn't tie up or if there's some sort of implicit approval from Father June because screw it, it makes us money. But keep in mind, Father June is completely in the dark on this opium deal. So I would imagine he's also in the dark on the protection part of the opium, storage.
I would assume that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So the bodyguards come out, the thugs see them, and there is no confrontation this time. They stand down, they stand aside, and the workers continue on to their day. No confrontation.
Pretty quick, straightforward scene. We just see that now the working business relationship between Penny and, well, really the Hop Way.
Yeah, the first impact of their relationship, which is the workers are now protected.
Right.
Back to the Banshee we go. The guy's playing the piano. The crowd is lively. And Leary sticks his head in and he's annoyed at the piano player because he says, "You played the same fucking song 3 times tonight. Play something different," right? And my initial thought was he's just really enamored by Sophie's piano playing. And then just then, as he walks away, all he has is her music in his head, right?
And then we cut to Sophie actually playing the song. And then we kind of, that morphs into the next scene.
Yeah, it's kind of a montage, actually.
Right.
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 And we see the mayor and his wife. That's the start of the montage.
Yeah, and this is pretty cool because it's just sort of giving you a nonverbal cue as to everyone's relationship and the status. And,
exactly. And the mayor gives his wife. It starts off with the mayor kind of giving her angry eyes, right? And then it's off to Mai Ling and Li Yang, and he gives her angry eyes.
I didn't take it as anger so much as disillusionment. I think he's disillusioned because I think that he's a guy that more than anyone perhaps maybe operates by a certain code. He's no Boy Scout for sure, but he operates at a certain code. And at least in the case of the other Tong, he didn't want to go that route. He's now seen a side of Mai Ling that he's not familiar with. So I took this more as disillusionment than anger. That was my take on it.
He doesn't like it. Maybe he's just wondering who are you? Maybe that's what it was. But either way, he was eyeing her up with no words, right? Yeah. And then the montage continues, and we've got Bill and his family, and they're praying at dinner, saying grace. Then we got Lee pouring himself some more laudanum, drinking it down. He's definitely got a problem now, Mike. And then, of course, we get the confirmation of what we've been suspecting to close out this montage, which is the Hopwe are indeed storing their opium at Penny's factory, and they lock the storage compartment away.
Yes. And scene.
Boom. And that's the episode. Boy, this one just made everything so much more sticky, and not in the young June way.
Yeah, we got some answers, but we also got some more questions.
Wow, I think we got more questions than answers, but really what you're seeing here is everybody sort of operating in a fend for themselves manner, even though they're all intertwined in some way. Buckley's looking out for himself. Mai Ling is looking out for herself. Assam is now looking out for himself. Penny is looking out for herself. Chow is everybody's looking out for herself. I think the only one not looking out for herself is this Davenport lady right now.
Yeah, and she's kind of a new moral center to the show. She's brought a little bit of a moral ethic into this.
Yeah. Yeah. Something interesting that we hadn't seen yet, which is the liberation of the brothels and of the prostitutes. So that's a new twist. And to learn that was based on a real person also makes things interesting. And this whole episode sets up for what's going to be some great story development. I'm especially interested to see how long it's going to take for Atoy's partner to crack, because that guy doesn't appear to me like a character who has a strong will, Mike. Or the stomach. Remember when Atoy killed them guys and he's like, "Oh my God, what did you do?" Right? He doesn't have the stomach for
this. Yeah. He's definitely playing on the deeper end of the water right now.
Yeah, he's out of his element a little bit, that guy.
Yeah, and we see now that he's on the radar of the police too, which is obviously would make anyone uncomfortable.
Yeah, for sure. And then of course we've got the whole situation with Bill and his job with Zing. And how much longer is that going to go on for before either Bill asserts himself and gets out of the situation, or if Zing reels him in a little deeper? And then finally, of course, what are the police going to do? Are they going to find the swordsman to get the senator and the mayor and Buckley off the police's back? All setting up for a hell of a, what do we got? 8 episodes to go in the season, Mike. And we'll be back next week to talk about Season 2, Episode 3.
Can't wait.
Like and subscribe, please, to our channel. Spread the word. Tell anybody you know about this excellent podcast that we have put together for you, where we talk about this show, episode by episode, and we will be doing it again next week. But for now, that wraps up Diced Onion. We'll see you next time.